This is one of the most controversial bits of the whole of the book of Revelation. People have lots of different interpretations of it. I'm going to give you mine in 3 minutes. It's very hard for us to go through all the different views. I'll just point you to this book, Revelation by Michael Wilcock, which is a very helpful commentary that I've found when I've tried to wrestle with some of the trickier issues of Revelation. How do you understand the 1,000-year period is what a lot of people debate. My understanding of it is, first of all, it's a symbolic number. It's not a literal 1,000 years. And one of the reasons I think that is because consistently throughout Revelation, metaphor is the main way of communication. For something to be said literally is unusual. And so that's why Jesus is described as the Lamb. That's why here it talks about a literal pit and a literal key. I'm not sure there's an actual physical key somewhere that they're going to use to lock Satan in with. Satan's described as a dragon. Again, I don't think he's an actual dragon. It's something that's a symbol to communicate something about him. And so I think the same is true of the 1,000-year period. I don't think it's a literal 1,000 years. Secondly, people debate when is this 1,000 years going to happen. Some people put it in the future, some people say it's already happened. I would say, along with lots of other people, that actually I think we're living in the period, if you get 1,000 years out of your head, we're living in the period where Satan has been thrown in a pit and bound in some sense. And I think that for two reasons. Whenever we try to understand Revelation, it's helpful to compare it to other parts of the scripture because they will help us interpret Revelation. And there are two things that we see elsewhere in scripture. The only other reference to Satan being bound comes from Jesus himself. And in the Gospels, Jesus comes along and he says, I have bound Satan. He talks about he's come to bind up the strong man. So I think that this binding of Satan actually took place when Jesus arrived. And so as a result of that, we're living in this period that is represented by 1,000 years within which Satan has been restricted. Now, it might seem like Satan has a lot of power today, but actually, Jesus very clearly says he's come to bind him. So his powers are restricted clearly in terms of what they were before Jesus was around. The second thing is not just that Jesus talks about binding Satan, but also it says here that when Satan is bound, his power to deceive will be taken away. And Jesus is described as the light of revelation to the Gentiles. He's praised when he's, God is praised when he's born for the fact that suddenly revelation is being poured out. Elsewhere, we hear about how finally the mysteries of God have been made known to us in the person of Jesus. And today, every time a person becomes a Christian, it's evidence that Satan's power to deceive us is limited. So we're living in this period that's described of Satan's power being restricted and limited, and we have been since Jesus arrived. This passage intimates, it suggests that there's going to be a kind of a rally from Satan, that he's going to kind of like a dying beast in the last throes of death, finally have sort of a desperate attempt to attack us, but ultimately affirms that God is going to have his way and that he will win. And the whole notion of the saints who reign in glory and make judgments, again, I would understand that not to be something that happens simply in the future, but something that we as the church, we have that authority to an extent now. The first resurrection doesn't refer to a resurrection that's going to take place. Actually, in this instance, it refers to the fact that we have been born again. And that's entirely consistent with the language for the rest of the New Testament. What does all of this mean for us? It means Satan's power is limited. It means Jesus Christ is going to win, and so we're on the winning side. But it also means that we're in a war. Now, fortunately, we have a general who knows how to fight, but we today are to pray and to fight evil wherever we find it.